Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? Monday night. We just had family night and starting the week. My man Bernie, how are you, sir?
Dude, I'm feeling good. 70,000 plus at family night the other night. How fantastic is that? Highlight of the night for me, though, is the Pop Warner kid catching the three
Yes.
balls on the punt return drill. Good for that kid. You love to see the Packers get wild and huddle around him and show him love. That's what family night's all about. So I'm doing good, Amar. How about you?
Man, look, you couldn't say it any better than that. I'm telling you right now, that family night, that just shows you the love that Packers fans have for their teams. Coming up 70 plus thousand coming for a practice, basically. And you got these young little tykes out there catching balls and having a great time. The whole team, I'm just saying, like, it was absolutely amazing. The fireworks, the whole 9 yards, Jordan looking great. And man, it was awesome. But, I know, coast to coast Packers guys, we're here every week. We're just trying to bring new things to you guys, and we have a treat for you. All right. There's a man that we're going to introduce. His name is Matt Waldman. He's a writer with the Footballguys. He's probably I want to say he's probably one of the founders, but he's definitely one of the guys I was there from day one. Absolutely amazing. He's also a Browns fan, so I'm pretty sure he could tell us a little bit about this preseason game coming up. He's probably one of the the most well-known people when it comes to be able to show what rookies when they're coming out of college, how they will be when they come to NFL. Like his breakdown of just understanding all those offenses, especially running backs, and showing people like, hey, these are the things that he looks at when it comes to their ability, how that could kind of forecast into the future, as well as use the information for your fantasy football drafts and like that. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I am so happy to have him with us here today. And here he is, Mr. Waldman. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Bernie. It's a pleasure to meet you guys, and it's going to be fun to get a chance to talk shop, talk Packers, NFL coming up. It's going to be, should be a good season.
You're not lying, man. Like it feels like it was just like yesterday the draft was here. And now it's funny, like the season ends, Packers lose, and I'm just like, man, like I just want the next season to start now. And it's been a slow burn to get to where we are, but we're literally not even less than a week away from our first preseason game. We just had the Hall of Fame game. And I just wanted to first have you just talk a little bit about yourself, like how you got into this, how you got into just breaking down film for college players and just becoming such an expert on just understanding how these players, what they've done in college and how it translates so well into the NFL.
I've had a really weird path. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up. It was funny. I went to go see my father, who, by the way, is a Broncos fan. So I went to see him. He's retired out in Arizona. I went and saw him, and he looked at me the other day and said, everything you did in your life has kind of contributed to what you're doing now. And I said, yeah, I mean, that's true. But I didn't start off thinking I wanted to scout football or, at all. I wanted to be a jazz musician. And I went to school a little bit at the University of Miami and played the saxophone and played in salsa and merengue bands and big bands and funk bands and things like that. And then I left about 2.5 years in, decided that I didn't know what I wanted to do. And maybe the best thing to do as an Atlanta area kid was to go to the cheapest school and just figure it out. And that was the University of Georgia in Athens before, Georgia became like a better school.
Powerhouse.
And so I went there and worked and tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I learned how to type in about a month and went to the journalism program, and that was a pretty good school. And I wound up within about a week of I went to the student newspaper and said, I want to write for you guys. And they were like, well, we want upperclassmen get these jobs and you can do some stringing. And if we like what you do, maybe we'll give you some more. And by the end of the week, I was covering the football team as a paid staff writer every day. And I didn't really know. I mean, writing just was something that it turned out I was pretty good at and didn't realize it and just, worked at it a little bit more. But then after about a quarter, I got bored with it and decided I didn't want to do it. Even though I was getting a chance to see Garrison Hurst and Terrell Davis and all those guys. And, at that time. Yeah, those were some good, those were some good players.
Yeah.
So I ended up finishing school. I ended up in a job that was like a part-time gig that turned into a full-time gig. And the next thing you know, 15 years later, I had a house in Athens, and I was working in their corporate office that was based in New Jersey, but being able to do it from remotely from Athens, even though it was like the early 2000s before remote was
I was
remote.
gonna say that's unheard of back then.
Yeah. So I was like I was an operations manager for a while, and then operations director for a quality director. And I'm sharing this because I did a lot of writing. I still did freelance writing. And then also I was learning how to create databases. And then I had learned I had to work on like how to evaluate performance and how to train people and track information and create reporting that would drive change. And so I ended up getting certified in a methodology that was best practices that was borrowed from the manufacturing industry on evaluating talent. But I was using it for the call center industry because that's what I was in. I worked for one of the larger call center providers and did work for folks like AOL, Time Warner, things like that, and back in the day. And I was a big football fan, and we had our local fantasy league, our work league that everybody, got together with, and we'd go to the local bar to score the teams. This was back in the mid-90s.
Newspaper, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And half the guys in my league were writing for these fantasy sites, like writing news things for fantasy sites. And so next thing I knew, I just had this idea where I thought, you know what? I'd kind of like to start a website. And I thought about, doing some things with that. And then I ended up being in a league with a friend who got me into fantasy football. And one of the league mates actually wrote at fftoday.com, a fantasy football site that's one of the older sites out there, and still running, doing well. And so I met a guy there who's a good friend of mine still, and we ended up, some of the things that I was writing that I was going to do for my own site. I had a column called The Gut Check that I was going to do, and I wrote like about 5 or 6 of these ahead of time. And he liked talking with me by email, and he said, you're a good writer. Have you ever thought about doing this? I said, well, that's what I was thinking about doing, but I don't think it's going to work out. Why do you need a writer? And I showed him my stuff, and he was like, yeah, let's hire you yesterday. And I did that for a few years and wound up at Footballguys, later on in 2009. And before that time, around 2005, I just, I was in my office reading Gil Brandt on NFL.com doing a mock draft. And he was talking about this a running back out of Villanova who was like, he said if he was like a couple inches taller and maybe about 10 pounds heavier, he'd be a top 5 overall pick. And my first initial reaction was like, well, why isn't he one now? I mean, like, what's the big deal about that? And then I thought about it from a corporate sense, and I thought, oh, this is resume bullet points. Basically, he didn't go to FSU, though he had a scholarship there at one time, but he had 2 ACL injuries during his career, and he played at Villanova. So it was like all the resume bullet points that allow teams to cover their behinds weren't really there for him. So he was a higher risk player, especially because he was shorter and smaller, all that. It was Brian Westbrook, and I thought to myself, and he was the first player I ever wrote about in my Gut Check column. But when that kind of got me interested in thinking, I'd like to evaluate players. And I realized that I had made databases. I had all these best practices on how to create the evaluation process. And I was doing that for 70 branches at a company, for 10,000 employees. Why don't I do that for something that I like and see if I can learn the game? Because the process was supposed to encourage you to get better at what you do. If you follow it strictly, you'll learn more. Right. So that's what I did. And so I ended up starting the rookie scouting portfolio, and I did that in 2006. And I remember locking myself in a hotel room like about a month before because I hadn't gotten enough done, and just renting one out. I had a friend of a friend who was a manager at a local hotel in Athens, and they gave me a discount rate. I brought my PC into the room. I literally logged how many hours I worked just to see what it would take, and I worked like 129 hours that week. I barely slept. And I thought, I'm either going to hate this and I'm never going to do it again, or I'm going to realize I have the bug with this and I'm going to try and make this something, more. And when I was done, I was exhausted, but I loved it. And I was like, I got to do this. So I've kind of combined, my background with writing and doing a lot of freelance work in the past with a lot of operations and quality management understanding, and kind of getting an opportunity to see what's behind the curtain, because NFL is just a business. So I've had scouts tell me a few years later, they're like, I thought you worked in the league, because the things you would say, media would look at it and tell you this, but they didn't realize that that's just the wizard in front of the curtain. You seem to know the wizard behind the curtain, and you weren't even in the league. And a lot of it was just from business experience and common sense of seeing some of this stuff. And then I got better watching football with the help of some scouts, with the help of different resources, and just honestly playing I Spy every day for hours a day, writing down everything I saw, and using the process I had to kind of figure out how to get better at this. So that's the long of it, but that's kind of how I got into this. And it just grew into a full-time gig for me, probably around 2015, 2016. About 2016, I finally just, I left what I was doing. By that time, I was an editor at the University of Georgia, writing for their business magazine and doing work there. And then I left there after I got my 10 years and my pension.
Yeah,
and,
you're like, I'm good now.
and was able to move on. And part of that too was that Footballguys brought me on in a larger capacity, after being there for, probably about 8 or 9 years at that point. Okay. So it's been, it's been a crazy journey. I'll just put it that way.
Well, your journey's encouraging, because Amar and I are kind of in that journey right now, right? We're supposed to be deep into a career right now, and I just resigned from school, teaching school, and I'm just like, man, I got to do this. And I'm looking at some nonprofits to work with, right? Because I'm not at a point where I can walk away from it all, but it's good to hear that you found this love, and the grind was bearable in this sense, like. Right. That's kind of how I'm feeling about this. If I put long days in front of the computer or making content, it's at the end of the day, I'm like, we're doing something we love. Right.
And I think it's a great way of looking at it. I mean, it's not doing something you love isn't always the thing for everybody, but it can be for a lot of people. Like I equate it to, for some people, I always say, like, what's your favorite food? And, and if they're like chocolate chip cookies, I'm like, well, the grind is eating a plate of chocolate chip cookies every day with nothing else. And, you're going to want a salad eventually, you just are, you may need one eventually after that, but but it's one of those deals where that can be hard, even though people think you're living the dream. But at the same time, there is something, it does inspire you. I mean, I've had, you do have moments where I've taken huge pay cuts to do this and turned down things to do what I was doing. And, the one that I joke about a lot, because if you think about the around the NFL guys, with, Greg Rosenthal twice was probably going to be my boss at Roto World, where I was going to be working side by side with this guy, Evan Silva, where we were going to be just writing blurbs and doing stuff like that. But I turned him down one year, and then the next, and I was going to have like my gut check was going to be a featured column at Fox Sports. But I looked at Fox Sports, and I looked at my column, and I looked at what I like to do, and I thought, there's nothing wrong with 500-word articles. They're great, but what I want to explore isn't going to be done in 500 words, and I don't want to do that. And so I said no. And then I thought about it again, and they sought me out again, and I reached out to them, and they were like, sure, we'd like to do it. And then I talked to Greg, and I thought, I still have this rookie scouting portfolio that I'm just got a couple years into. I think I made $700 my first 3 or 4 years doing it,
Yeah.
so that was, because I was an unknown in a space that was starting out, and I was just trying to figure it out. But I remember turning them down because one of the biggest reasons is Greg was like, well, could I I have this draft guide I want to develop and do, and I want to do it the way I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you okay with that while I do all this other fantasy stuff? He said, why don't you just write for our draft guide at Roto World?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, he's going to just look at me like I'm nuts when I turn this down, because I want to keep pursuing this. I want this to be my own thing. And I remember he was great. Greg was great, but I remember he was a little exasperated,
Couldn't believe it.
with me asking that. Not majorly, but I could just a hint of it, like, really? Like, dude, you're going to get to do this, And I remember that summer, being 35, 36 years old and having some life changes where it was like, I'm in my house, but like I gave all the furniture to my ex and the kids so that they could have that. And I had a desk, and I had a futon mattress, and that was it. And I remember turning on the preseason on Sunday Night Football, and there's Greg Rosenthal with NBC, seeing him on NBC.
Yeah.
And can I curse?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Because I was like thinking, I better fucking make this work. Because like, because I saw that, and I was like, oh shit, I better fucking make this work. So fortunately I did. But like, I've had you have those tests along the way with what you do, and I'm very fortunate. I've met my wife a couple years later, and she's been pivotal. Alicia's been just fantastic in terms of that. She was a business owner, and she's also just someone that I remember she saw this and said, I don't know anything about football. I'm from North Carolina. All we do is watch basketball. And I could care less about football, but I can see that you've got something here that we could grow and do, and was 100% behind it, even when the optics were like, didn't look all that good, so she, it's nice to be where you are, but you have to have the passion to do entrepreneurial things, and you have to love that, or you have to be one of those people who just, their passion is making money and selling it and moving on. But I'm not one of those people. I don't like that game as much as I like the game of developing your own thing and seeing how far you can take that one thing.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm in the corporate world. I've been in the corporate world now for like 20 years. So you're giving me hope right now, because that's what I do. I manage people, and I have to evaluate talent. I have to figure out ways to make sure we get the job done and all that stuff. So everything you said resonated so hard with me. And I'm just like, Bernie, like, I love everything about football. I mean, of course, I'm a diehard Packers fan, but just the whole game of football, I just love everything about it, and every team. And like, you're like singing my song right now. Like,
and look, you guys got a good team. I mean, it sounds like I'm kissing up, but I was a Cleveland Browns fan. My family growing up were the Packers and the Browns were great rivals, and they were some great teams. I've seen some teams that potentially could have been great, and then my dad's Broncos with John Elway kind of dashed those hopes a few times.
Same for us too. So we feel you on that.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not happy about that game right now.
No. But
1999, man.
Yeah, I got a chance to go to Lambeau Field a few years ago. I got to speak. Nice. I got to speak at an event to talk about the RSP and how I do what I do. And they flew me up there, and so they gave me a tour of Lambeau Field, and it was fantastic. I mean, how could you? I mean, that's such a revered place, and you could see why. And the people were so friendly, and the town seemed very friendly, and it's just like it. It's a magical place, and I'm kind of jaded about football. I'm not one of those people that's like, I want to see every stadium, and I'm not. I love the game, but I'm not all about the pageantry. Pageant, but that's one of those places that you got to have a pull. If you don't appreciate the pageantry and the history and what that's all about and how people are in the town there, you don't have a pulse. So
Yeah, absolutely. We had Ryan Grant on recently, and he was just talking about Green Bay and his experience there, and he was talking about how it felt like family, and he's like, and it wasn't just the organization. He's like, it's the whole community that you feel like it's part of your family. And so just to hear that straight out of players' mouths, just like it's the experience in Green Bay is so different. I know recently, or just today or yesterday, Jonathan Owens, who's now with the Bears, made the comment about how he didn't miss Green Bay. And I feel like, I've heard that from a lot of players, and I feel like that's their go-to because they don't have anything else to really criticize about Green Bay. So like, oh, I don't miss it. It's like, yeah, I don't know about that, man. Give it this season with the Bears and see if you miss it.
Yeah, I was gonna say he doesn't take that long in the Bears. Midway, he's gonna be saying something else. Let's be honest now.
I mean, it's the competitive juices. Every place that you're going, they're paying you. It's gonna be better. But I heard the same things. I had a friend who was a big Packers fan, and his best buddy was a Niners fan. And when it was like T.O. and Young and Favre and all that, they went up to Green Bay for one of those playoff games. Ooh. And my friend who was the 49ers fan, he was literally like, I felt like I was on another planet in the Twilight Zone because everyone was so nice.
Yep.
You go into places, I'm wearing my 49ers gear, and they're literally like, oh, good luck this weekend. Good luck with the game, And he's literally, he's from Atlanta, like we're all, and he's like, I mean, even Atlanta aren't even like diehard fans compared to other places, but try wearing a Saints jersey in Atlanta.
Yeah, that's
like,
not happening.
That's not happening. Or a Pittsburgh jersey in Cleveland.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like,
exactly.
So it is a magical place that way.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like, I one of the things, because the fact that all the tourism, all the people that come visit, that is literally the lifeblood of Green Bay, right? Without that, people aren't going to come visit if you're going to treat them like crap. And of course, it's one thing that I went to a Packers Philly game, and I brought a lot of my Philly friends with me, and they were just really thrown off by it because they're from Philly, right? And Philly's like just complete opposite spectrum of that. Yeah. They're like, dude, we beat y'all, and all these guys are being all cool with us, giving us beers, giving us brats, and all this. I'm like, yeah, dude, they're not gonna be mean to you. I was like, you gotta be. Even if you're a Bears fan, they'll find a way to be courteous to you to a degree. You know what I'm saying? But they'll still be pretty chill with you. They won't, unless they start talking trash. That's a whole other story.
It's probably why the Bears hate them more, is that they're so nice even still, and they're not. So And I'm a frequent guest of a Bears podcast, and it's funny because I think about it, and it's like when they talk about the Packers, they relish the opportunity to beat the Packers, but the way they talk about them, they almost feel like I can't really say certain things because it's like I feel bad. I feel bad. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, that's true.
Is it with Dave? Is it with Dave?
No, the Keeping It 100 podcast with Phil Otoshian and Shane. They're kind of an independent group that they're a good group of guys. I really enjoy doing that.
One of my best friends from my time in service is a Bears fan, and when we first met, man, he loved giving me a hard time. And of course, the year that we meet too, it's when sexy Rexy Grossman led them to a Super Bowl. If you want to say that, Rex Grossman led them to the Super Bowl. But I was just like, of course, the year that I meet this guy who loves talking trash about the Packers, the Bears make a run to the Super Bowl, but then post that, he's kind of like, he's really softened and opened up. And he ended up telling me one day, he's like, man, I'm kind of glad I met you. Cause he's like, I was so vindictive and angry and spiteful towards all Packers fans. He's like, and I just dumped on you for years. He's like, and you hardly say shit. And he's like, and then he's like, a few years later, your Packers win a Super Bowl. And he's like, when they won, he's just like, I was waiting for days. He's like, for you to text me and talk trash until he's like, I finally broke down and texted you, congratulations on your Super Bowl. So it only took a few years to bust those walls down, but Bears fans got a heart, so I understand why they're still spiteful from the last 30 years, though.
Yeah, I get it. We have a common enemy, which is the Vikings. It kind of works out pretty good. So
yeah. Speaking about Green Bay, right? The draft is coming there next spring, right? So we're going to get to hear about rookies. Let's talk about some Packer rookies right now. if we can, let's jump into some of this. And the person I want to start off right away is Marshawn Lloyd. We haven't got to see him a lot because he's got, I think he's dealing with a hip injury, right, Amar?
Yep. He's back now. He's back now, but he did have a little bit of hip before, but he's back in practice now.
Okay. And so what's your take or your read on him? Because I know some people are thinking he was the best running back in the draft.
Mm-hmm. And I think that on a level where if you're looking at the size, speed, explosion combination of someone who can move well and can catch the football, he's certainly up there. The thing with Lloyd is that he's one of those guys that may need a year to really put it all together, maybe 2 if things don't go well this year. And the things where he needs to put it together aren't insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. But it's common with guys like Travis Etienne is a good example recently, or Rashad White, 2 guys who they leaned on their athletic ability like a lot of young running backs do. When you're one of the best athletes on the field, and he was a 5-star athlete, you can often, when you're running a play that's designed to go inside, oftentimes you'll see the gaps get filled early, and instead of trying to work within the scheme to get what's available there and manage the game, kind of like a quarterback throwing the ball away when nothing's there, and then instead of maybe a quarterback trying to do a poor imitation of Josh Allen and failing, and ending up Dan Orlovsky in it, or that kind of type of thing. You want to take what's there, because it keeps the playbook open for the offense to have a 2nd and 8 or a 2nd and 10 rather than a 2nd and 14. Exactly. And so this is why coaches oftentimes bring in veterans who aren't all that sexy in terms of their athletic ability anymore. And why, like, fantasy people hated Frank Gore for about 4 or 5 years.
He would get it done, though.
Exactly.
He would get it done, though.
He would, whether it was him showing Marlon Mack how to do it or Kenyon Drake how to do it. It was because they knew that if we needed 2 yards, you're going to get 2 yards. And if you don't get 2 yards, you're not going to lose 5 trying to get 20 in an impossible situation. And Marshawn Lloyd kind of has that mentality right now. It's that home run thing. I joke around years ago. It's like the corner store. It's like, there's nothing good for you at the corner store. It's sometimes a fun place to go and get things that you claim you need, and that you'd like to have, and it's convenient. And sometimes you have a real good time because you went there. But more often than not, if you're trying to go there to get everything, you've spent too much money. You probably got stuff that's not good for you, and there's a possibility you might get in some trouble too, depending on who's there and at what time of day you or night you've went. You might need to be careful. So he's kind of that guy who tries to take the corner with his speed a little too much, and he also has an awful ball security rate.
That's the big thing about him.
But here's the thing: so did Sony Michel, who was a player who had awful ball security, and he fixed it, and it was never a problem. So these are both areas that players can get better at. But if they don't get better at it by, say, the end of year 2, early year 3, they probably aren't going to get better at it. Like Tevin Coleman never really got much better at it.
Oh, God, Tevin Coleman. That's a good pull. Yeah.
Not Isaiah Spiller. CJ Spiller never really got better at it. And then the kid, Lawrence Maroney, the former Minnesota back, never got better at it. And those are examples of guys that you have to realize that could be the bad end of it. But I think the fact that he's going to get to play with Josh Jacobs and AJ Dillon, who is a smart runner, it's just that, those are 2 smart runners that he can work with and understand how things are going to go. And if he can curb those tendencies, he may get the Aaron Jones opportunity to be like the early career Aaron Jones in terms of role, not necessarily talent, and get some time in the passing game, put out in space, given things that he does well. And then if he does really well with that, and they start to open it up as the year ends, and they look at Josh Jacobs and say, well, we got an out, we'll roll with Marshawn and see how that works. So I think the upside's there for that to happen, But the realistic side of it is most likely that they're going to keep both those fellas, because I think Matt LaFleur, I think from what I heard was that he really expected Aaron Jones to be sticking around, and that they were going to get another back, and they were going to tandem them together. So even if Josh Jacobs has a strong year, they were always planning to have a tandem.
Yeah, I think that's why they brought like AJ Dillon. I think that your comment about the veteran presence and having a guy that just knows what to do is probably why they brought Dillon back, because he is good in pass protection, and on top of that too, he runs the play as it should be ran, right? Yeah. And even at practice, we've seen Marshawn Lloyd where he did bounce out to the outside, and he did like a 50-yard touchdown. But again, was that what the play was called, right? Or was that him improvising and just taking it to the side, to the corner?
And Tank Bigsby last year did a lot of that.
Yeah.
He was wowing everybody in training camp. And then the lights came on and nobody was home because, he was going to get better, but he tried to bounce everything outside. And suddenly now he's facing different defensive looks. They're actually really hitting, as opposed to sort of hitting.
Yeah, kind of touching.
Yeah. And now they're gonna be a little trickier with how they disguise looks. And he didn't recognize a lot of that stuff. And so that happened. And then next thing you know, he's overthinking things. He's dropping the football. He's having to bounce off his hands, forcing interceptions for Lawrence, fumbling the ball. That's the kind of stuff that happens when you start overthinking.
Yeah.
And you, as a rookie, you're prone to doing that because there's so many things that you have to account for as a rookie, and not even on the field, even though the offenses are more, the schemes are denser in terms of the playbook. The disguises are better by the defenders. The defenders are more, everyone's the best athlete on their college team now. So even the defensive tackle can run you down when you try to do some of the stuff that you were doing at South Carolina and USC. And then we're not even getting to, are you now the financial moneymaker in your family? Do you have people who are dependent on you? You're in a new town? You're in your early 20s. Now you're famous beyond the level of what you were in two cities.
Right.
And you're making a whole heck of a lot more money. And the pressure is much bigger.
Big. Yeah,
and he hasn't even gotten to see what it's like in the locker room week one.
Yeah.
Ben Watson talked about that a lot with me, saying that week one, when I was with the Patriots the first year, I was like, I realized I was playing with grown-ass men who were paying mortgages. And he said, I was at Duke in Georgia, and he said those were big-time college football places, but the quiet intensity is just like, it's deafening, and you feel it. He said, you feel the pressure, like these guys are serious, and they don't want you messing up their contracts and their money. So he's
all that kind of weighs on you. It's the real aspect of things that you don't really think about when you're like a young 21-year-old player coming to NFL. Like, you made to NFL, but now there's so many different things, variables that you didn't even think about probably. And then you're like, oh crap, now there's so many people depending on me. I remember like when Larry Johnson was going for his contract extension, and he was really talking about how like he wanted to get paid, and people were kind of busting him up about it. But he goes, but I have so many people that I am looking out for that I need to take care of. So if this falls out, I'm able to take care of myself and them. And I guess people that don't know where a lot of these players come from, they don't understand that they might be the meal ticket for a lot of people in their family that don't have anything. Right?
For sure. And even without just that, I mean, even just the pressure of being like, suddenly you were the best, and everyone, I talked about Drew Lock a lot, and where, when I evaluated him, I kind of felt like, okay, this is a kid who you can tell is very talented, but hasn't completely worked at the game at the level that he needs to become an NFL starter yet. And you can see it show up against the better SEC teams where there's things he's going to have to do. And he looks like the kid who had the 2-3 week project he had to get together, and he tried to do it the weekend before, like he looked like that. And then my buddy Cecil Lammy over at Footballguys, who covers the Broncos beat, he told me year 3, he said he talked to Drew's dad, and Drew's dad said to him, he said, listen, and it validated the scouting report to a T, because he said, we've been telling Drew since high school, these are things you got to work on. He's been told this in college. And Drew's not a bad kid. He's a really good kid. He said, but he, like a lot of young guys, everyone all the fans, all his teammates told him how good he was. He was the man at Missouri, though he didn't think about the fact that he wasn't at Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, where there were 5 guys behind him who could take his job if he screwed up and the coaches decide to enforce it. But they had no one else other than him. So he just thought later. So when Peyton Manning called him at draft night and said, anything you need, let me know.
He didn't call.
He didn't call him. He said thanks and hung up. He didn't do what we would have done in hindsight, which is, can I wash your car?
Yeah, I
can live in. I just need a yoga mat and a blanket, dude. Like, and you just show me what you need to show me, and I'll do that. And then year 3, when they brought Teddy Bridgewater in to compete for his job, that's when he called Peyton back. And it was too late. And his dad said, it's too late. It's like, he's going to figure it out, but like, he just figured it out. And now it's like late in the game and didn't realize, and that's just one of those things that's about being young. So those are the dynamics we don't see from the tape, but they're important because it's just like the regular world. You're going to get guys that come in and they feel like, I got this company. I just got into this company. I've made it, and then then you're not working at the level that you need to be. They expect you to raise your game.
I got to ask, was that the kind of the same experience with Johnny Football in Cleveland?
Oh, that was just a disaster. Like that was like, I took a hiatus from being a Browns fan when they left because I couldn't root for Baltimore, though I'm kind of still a closeted Baltimore fan because that's my team. But, in spirit, like everything about how they ran, what they did, down to the GM that they took with them there, who was my favorite player growing up, Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah, I was going to say, Newsome was the man.
It's like, yeah. So, like, that was all, like, that was my team. And they're, like, winning Super Bowl in Baltimore with the players and the mentality and everything. And we've got the zombie team in Cleveland. That they left us with, So I was like a Titans fan for a while with Steve McNair and Eddie George. And then when Marshawn Lynch got traded, I became a Lynch fan and I became a Seahawks fan for a little while. And I watched the Manziel disaster playing out one Monday night. And I realized I still cared, and I needed to stop being in denial about the fact that I was still
kept bouncing around.
I just was like, and all the teams were like the Marty Schottenheimer iteration of the Browns in terms of scheme and how they played. Strong running game, brainy quarterback, really strong man-to-man defenses that could rush the passer and cover and shut down. And the defense, they led with defense and won with a reasonably smart quarterback in a run game. So anyway, Manziel is just a good example of what you probably don't want to do scouting wise, or if it wasn't the scouting, it was more the ownership. And I honestly think ownership probably made them.
Yeah, they pay a lot into that one. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because when you watch Manziel on tape, really, he was Patrick Mahomes in a lot of respects, not 1-to-1. So don't listen and don't go crazy. But like playmaker, Mahomes, all those players like that have to figure out their boundaries of what they can get away with in the pros that they got away with in college because they're dynamic in that sense. But you have to kind of figure that out. And Manziel had that ability and could have done that if he worked at the game. But obviously we learned from the Netflix special
that was awesome. Yeah.
That he didn't look at anything. And so that story, he didn't care. He didn't want to. He just thought he was going to be a college player. He turned into a megastar. Yep. And then he was like, I don't want to be a pro, but now he feels like he had to. And you look at the ownership. And I think what happened here is they told the story on Netflix about how the scouts went down there for the pro day and how he was wasted. His teammates were wasted. They partied the night before and he's throwing the ball to like people on his like marketing team and like, lawyers and accountants. And like, I would think my first reaction was as a scout, if I saw that, I'd be going back home and going to the director of personnel, the GM, the owner, and going, we can't take him. We can't. There's no way. There's no way we can fucking take this kid. There's no way. But I think what probably happened is that the ownership knew of it and they just decided to go for it anyway, and that's happened. I mean, like with Vince Young, I mean, we know that that Jeff Fisher wanted Jay Cutler, that the offense coordinator was Norm Chow. They just brought in. He wanted Matt Leinart. The scouts wanted Jay Cutler, and then last minute, they thought he'd be a perfect fit for the team. Last minute, Bud Adams, who basically had the Houston say, "Go pound sand. We don't want to take your deal that you're proposing. Go somewhere else." He wanted to stick it to the city of Houston, so they got their, they got the Houston native Vince Young and brought him in.
All the things to do, like just because of that, be vindictive. Like that's so ridiculous.
But what's going to sell tickets? What's going to generate excitement? All these. I mean, we got the guy from the Carolina Panthers who's writing plays on his napkin because he stayed at he didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, but probably like a Ritz-Carlton.
Tepper, man, he's just
Tepper.
He's terrible. Like more and more I see of him, like videos of him just doing things he shouldn't be doing. I'm just like, I feel bad for Bryce Young. I think he's a good player. I'm just like, man, like you're just
maybe, and hopefully he'll learn from his mistakes, because I think that the owners Haslam has learned bit by bit, and maybe he'll have learned enough. We'll see. But I mean, then again, they got Deshaun Watson.
After everything that went down, that's what they do. It's like, okay, man, like
but some of these guys think they think they're masters of the universe because they're billionaires, and that's understandable. Their egos are huge, probably bigger than any quarterback or any NFL player, because of the amount of money they make. And on top of it, they're an exclusive club, and sometimes they play fantasy football with stuff, and it is frustrating to scouts. I've heard many scouts say there's a lot of decisions that we've spent years putting together and arriving at, only to be changed in the 11th hour by an owner who's like, so you're lucky as Packers fans, because I've joked in the past, man, like, or I've written in the past, like when I wrote at Football Outsiders back in the day, I had my franchise team. If I won the Powerball 100 times over and could buy an NFL team, I joked that I would buy Cleveland, but it would be with a clause that I would own the team for 10 years, and then I would sell it back to the city and do the Packers plan if they would let it happen. But
I just want to say one thing when you mentioned Drew Lock, because like that draft, Green Bay was looking at Drew Lock in the second round, and they were going to draft him, but then Denver jumped him and got him, and then instead we got Elton Jenkins. So the fact that you mentioned him just drives it out. I see him now, and I'm like, oh my God, that could have been our quarterback. And I was like, oh God, like that's not. No, I'm good. I'm happy that they worked.
You guys wound up with a good one, that's for sure, and they did a great job with him and Justin and Jordan Love, because I didn't like him.
Here we go. That's what I'm talking about. Your thoughts on Jordan.
I didn't like what I saw coming out. He was, you love the physical skills, great arm, great mobility. Some of the throws that he could make off script were fantastic. They were Mahomes-like in that level. But unlike Mahomes, he didn't read the field well at that time. He was one of those guys that he would throw into coverage and not read the leverage of defender on receiver and be able to make the right call. He was a lot like Desmond Ridder in that respect, where it was like, if red light, green light was the game of when to throw and when not to throw, he couldn't tell the difference between a red and a green light. He was colorblind, and the deeper into the game you got, the more he would try to lean on his athletic ability to a ridiculous degree, with like back foot off balance, kicking one leg up throws that are going into outer space and then coming down and letting a defender be able to grab it. And he'd make like 2 or 3 of these plays in a row. He'd like get into quicksand and it would just be awful. So you were like, this is not a guy who needs to be a first round pick, according to what we usually see happen with first round picks. Well, the Packers, in their wisdom, was they had Aaron Rodgers still at the height of his career. So they were like, yeah, we're going to draft him in the first round because we think this is the highest upside physical athlete. And everyone, if we're being real, quarterbacks fail at least at over 50% rate in the first round. So if we're going to draft one, let's not be afraid whether they're going to fail. Let's pick the one that we think we can give time to. And they did. And I've always been a believer that the best quarterbacks generally, not all the time, but Steve Young, Steve McNair, Drew Brees,
I was going to say,
Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, a lot of MVP caliber, Pro Bowl caliber talents. A lot of them sat early and got intermittent playing time, meaning that, they came in either to clean up a game or they got one start after they started to really get their footing. And if they really were screwing the pooch, then the coach would pull them out and say, it's okay. You're still our guy of the future, but you're not seeing things well. And we don't want to exacerbate what's going on to where you're going to get into bad habits and have issues. Watch what the veterans do in here. And if we get close, I'll put you back in to give you a chance to win it. Schottenheimer did that with Drew Brees, who credited Schottenheimer with developing, not Sean Payton. When he was in San Diego, that was exactly what they did with him. And with McNair, I remember they gave him packages of plays, and then it was a quarter, and then it was a half, and then eventually that kind of thing. Lamar got, Lamar had most of the season before he came in. And so Jordan Love got that. When Aaron Rodgers got hurt, he had to play, but they weren't like, you're the starter forever unless you really screw up and now we're done with you. They were just like, okay, give him a shot. Yeah. And so when you see him come onto the field now, like that first game in the opener, one of the first things you could notice with him is that his footwork was crisp. And the footwork is kind of like the window into a quarterback's mind, because everything there has to be unconscious in terms of the execution, has to be at the speed of instinct. So the footwork combinations in terms of, drops and hitches, and, if you're hesitating with your feet, that means you're not sure what you see and you're waiting to find what's going to happen, and oftentimes waiting too long. Yeah. If your feet are not precise with what you're doing, sometimes, like you look at Jameis Winston, he's a good example of a guy who his upper body and his lower body until recently in New Orleans used to be his lower body lagged behind his upper body. So it was like his brain was ahead of his body, and you could see him airmail balls, and you could see these types of things happening. And with Jordan Love, you saw that was all locked in week one, and that he was the things that, the things that he was supposed to know, he knew. And a lot of rookies who were more touted and supposedly better than where Love was don't always have that week one when they first get their starts, because they're now overthinking. So the first week with, watching that was encouraging. And then the first time they played the Lions, and the Lions played man-to-man against him, and he didn't do so well. Right. That was okay, good. Let's see what's going on here. And then the next time he saw man-to-man, he shredded it. Yeah. And he shredded the shredded the Lions with it too. And then you look at that and go, that's what you're supposed to see. You're seeing development happening. Yeah. And so the things that he needed to have down, he did. The things that it was going to be a process of learning and have up games and down games, he had, and he got better. So I'm very encouraged. The Packers gave him the ideal opportunity, because whether Aaron Rodgers helped directly doesn't matter. That's not, when we hear the narrative of, well, the quarterback's not receptive to helping, or he's just trying to compete for his thing, he's selfish, blah, 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 blah. No, man, he's got a job to do. Yeah. He's got so much stuff to do. If he's going to go above and beyond, good for him. But if he doesn't, as long as he's a good example for Jordan Love to watch and go, this is what a quarterback looks like in the NFL. That's all Aaron Rodgers needed to be, was to do his job and play well. And he was giving him better than what Zach Wilson saw, or Johnny Manziel saw, or Baker Mayfield saw, or even Drew Lock saw. So that's invaluable.
Yeah, I was good. That's amazing. I was gonna say, because you could see from his first start in Kansas City where, even the coaches even said they didn't really prepare him for that game like they should. They kind of prepared the game like Rodgers was back there still. And you saw that with the way they kind of did things. And then when he won that Philadelphia game in 2022, and everything just looked so much more effortless in comparison to that Kansas City game. And you're right. Like in the last year, he had those bumps and bruises, but it was crazy to see like every game, like even though he had some up and down games, it just felt like he was still sure of himself in a sense, right? Like even when things weren't going right, he still didn't like. I didn't see him revert back to too many bad habits that you may have seen back when his last year in Utah State, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point. And that happens with every player, because what quarterback evaluators, what I feel like I've learned about quarterback evaluation, and that has been valuable for me, it's been able to allow me to contribute for quarterback coach. For a quarterback coach, Will Hewlett's a quarterback coach. He coaches Anthony Richardson and Brock Purdy, and coached them pre-draft. And I've given scouting reports to those guys, to him and the guys at Cortex, to, for them to be able to kind of study up before they work with the player. Right. And a lot of, I've gotten to that point with doing stuff like this because I realize that quarterbacking is a stage performance kind of medium. It's not a science. It's not, and it's not all athletic ability. It's a position where you have to integrate a lot of different factors: physical, mental, conceptual, theory, and emotion. You have to be a leader. You have to learn when to contain emotion and show emotion. You need to know when to make certain play call changes when the opportunity exists and take those chances, because you've got a team on the ropes, as versus when not to do that. And also when you're starting out, all these skills, there's all these different skill sets with your arm and your shoulder and how your body, the whole movement chain is, your feet, how your eye discipline, how you read the field, all that theory, everything fused together. If the game's moving a beat faster than you are, all those things that you may have down on certain level start to fall apart. It's just like if you're playing music, or you're a stand-up comedian and you've got a routine down, and then someone heckles you, and they say something funny as shit, and you're like, and next thing you know, everything you remembered, you blank, and everything's going too fast for you to blank like that and not look like you completely lost it. And that's the kind of thing that happens on a football field with these young guys. And you have to expect that to be the case. But we get this drama that's brought up in the media of like, is he really good after all? Or is he the biggest all-time bust we've ever seen?
Yeah.
after 3 quarters of work, when we really need like 19 to 25 games to really see what happened. And because defenses are going to adjust after the first 6 to 8 anyway, but it takes that long for them to see it. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting position. It's one of the most fascinating ones. And for Love to have gotten all those things down, and for years, so it's ingrained that it's not like, oh, I have to learn the game plan. And yeah, I know that I've learned a 5-step drop back in high school, but now I'm tripping over my feet. No, he's not going to do that because he's done it enough now.
He's already past that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just say, go. Yeah.
I was just gonna grab some questions from the comment section, and the first question is from Heath Soder. He said, "So which team just doesn't understand player evaluation?" We kind of touched on the Titans had a big mistake you talked about there, and the Cleveland, Manziel, maybe the lock thing. But what is there teams, or maybe there's like GMs? It's more of the GM's fault rather than an organization.
I think owners tend to be the issue. Owners tend to be the guys who are like, when your corporation's losing money and they don't give out bonuses that year, and then the owner comes around the corporate office and shows a picture of the yacht he just bought. That's kind of the type of shit that happens in the NFL from what I hear. I would say that most scouting is very competitive to get into. It's very difficult to get a gig. And then once you're fired because they clean out a group and bring in the coaches guys or the new GMs guys or whatever. It's hard to get back into it. So I would say more than anything, if there's a issue with player evaluation, generally it's due to that they don't have a great process in place, which allows for people to come over the top and make calls that they shouldn't, like the Rams in St. Louis with Alex Smith, where they literally asked Dave Campazaro, I think that's the name, Phil Rosano, that's who. Phil Rosano, who was a longtime scout, whose dad helped build and scout the 49ers dynasties under Montana, Rice, all those guys.
Yeah.
And he grew up in those rooms, and then he became a scout. And this was documented on SI. You can go look it up, but I heard the story from him as well. And Russ Landy was there too, who was my podcast mate.
Russ Landy,
yeah. They were both in LA at that time. And when Gil Brandt was going over the moon about Alex Smith's pro day and said it was like Troy Aikman all over again, and everyone was losing their mind about Alex Smith, they had like a 5th round grade on him. And you guys, yeah, they had a 5th round grade on Alex Smith. They had Jeff Smoker, the Michigan State starting quarterback, had a higher grade than him. And when you really look at Alex Smith, I mean, he struggled for years.
Yeah, it took him a while to get right. Offensive coordinators changing every year didn't help, but you're right.
Yeah. So was he the number 1 overall pick based on what he did, or was he more of a 2nd or 3rd day pick who developed and got better? So it's like, so the problem is that after that pro day and after Gil Brandt going on TV, ownership or the front office decided we know that our team doesn't like Alex Smith, so but we're going to want to pick him. So let's get our ducks in a row. So the president of I think it was the president or the wasn't the GM, but one of the executives came downstairs to the scouting offices and said, "So we want you guys to take a second look at Alex Smith, and I've made a tape of plays that I don't know you guys have seen before or not, but I've made some tape of some plays. I want you only to scout off of this tape." Okay. It's a VCR tape. It's literally the equivalent of like a YouTube hit clip.
Yeah, like the kids put out
with the music and the close up of the player coming out of it. Yeah, I mean, it's like that. It was like the precursor to that. And they watched the 5 or 10 minutes of all these of his best 20 throws, and literally Rosano goes, "Fuck no, I'm not doing this. I've scouted this guy for 2.5 years. I've watched every game for 2.5 years. And you're going to want me to look at this fucking thing to judge that? Are you kidding me?" And an argument broke out, and they literally had to be separated because he was like, "We have a better grade on Jeff Smoker, and we have him as like a 4th round player, than we, so that kind of stuff happens. But I would say if there's a team that in recent history that it maybe wasn't great at a position, and I still think it has more to do with the process and the upper management than the scouts, it was the New England Patriots and wide receivers.
Yeah.
Other than slot receivers, they could not pick an outside receiver to save their life. And you could year after year after year. And
oh God.
N'Keal Harry, you have Aaron Dobson, you have a bunch of guys like that. But the thing is
they might have gotten it this year, though. They might have gotten it this year, I think.
They might have gotten it. I think they got better.
Yeah, that might be the one. Yeah,
I think him and Polk, I think, are pretty good.
Polk, it's Jalen Polk. It's Jalen Polk. Sorry.
Yeah, but no, I like Baker too. I like Baker a little more, but in some regards. But you're right. It's like the thing is, though, is that when they had, I believe it was the Ringer podcast that I was listening to. It was that or The Athletic, and they had Dante Scarnecchia on, I think, who was at the time a consultant with the team and not the offensive line. Right? Yeah, he was a consultant with the team, and it was pre-draft, and they were talking about, we're going to give you the inside scoop on how coaches scout, how the Patriots scout their draft prospects. And he comes on and says, well, we've been in the Super Bowl lately. So after the Super Bowl in late February, Bill gives us a list of players and that we need to watch, that the scouts have already watched. And so then we go back and go over the top and look at those. And if there's things that we think that we like better or do, then maybe we'll call them up and say, we want you to bump this guy up, or we want you to change this or do some of that. And that sounds all perfectly great when you're listening to it as a casual listener, but as like a process-oriented process manager or someone who's doing scouting, I look at that and go, okay, so let me get this straight. Instead of your scouts and your coaches being on the same page from the beginning about what should be watched and what the coaches want you looking for, what's valuable for their scheme and team, you're going to let these guys run on the hamster wheel for 2.5, 3 years. Now that these guys' reports are done, now in like 2 months before the draft, you're going to hand it to a coach and him go, well, we really wanted this, really? That's what, and then you're not going to like figure out ways so that the next time they like actually scout for that later on. You're just going to wait for Bill and the guys to say, yeah, nah,
we want these guys instead.
We want these guys instead. That's really great process, So, I mean, that's low hanging fruit right there in terms of, and so I have to think that maybe that happened one too many times with wide receivers. I like to joke that, Josh Norris at Underdog, who does fantastic work, they got the coup of getting Bill Belichick to do a show this year on Underdog.
Yeah, I got to give a that. That was pretty awesome. Yeah,
it's going to be awesome. But I jokingly tweeted on X, I said, Josh, just do me a favor. Whenever Bill opens his mouth about wide receivers, please have Steve Smith in the room. So, because I can't wait to hear Steve Smith bust on his ass for not being able to pick a wide receiver worth a damn.
Steve don't hold
and
back.
Steve won't hold back. And Steve knows his shit about wide receivers.
Does.
A lot of guys don't.
Yeah, they just
play the game. But he's one of those few, like him and Chris Spielman were two players that I would listen to about players, no matter what position they play.
Yeah. Well, so speaking about receivers, one of our folks here had a question about that, and you are one of like the guys that I trust the most when it comes to offense, especially wide receivers, because you and me are on the Hakeem Butler trying to get him back in the league and trying to do something with this guy, because I'm still on that train with you, man.
Well, I'll say this, Hakeem Butler is an interesting thing, but like I would say since I studied Hakeem Butler, who certainly it didn't work out, and he dropped a lot of passes early on, and he's trying to get his way back in. Since then, I've worked really hard on revamping my process on that position, and I would say that I've had a really good run of evaluations with players since then at that position, including Jaden Reed, including guys like AJ Brown and Cooper Kupp and folks like that. And a lot of it's credited to Devontae Wicks's personal wide receiver coach, Drew Lieberman. Drew Lieberman's works in Atlanta now, but I had him on as a guest, and he runs a website called The Sideline Hustle. And I literally filled up the board behind me with like all the criteria that I should probably use to create or revamp my wide receiver evaluation tool. And a lot of stuff I had, a lot of it I didn't. I'd say about maybe a third to a half I already had and just needed to kind of change around a little bit. And then the other half was just stuff I was like, let me incorporate this, and this makes sense, from releases to route running to different theoretical concepts of how you look at coverage and the type of work that you do from that standpoint. And when I did that, that really changed and refined how I looked at the position. And so when you look at this group, what's fascinating is you really do have four strong in terms of guys who could start. We'll start with Wicks in the sense that, and Drew was funny because Drew asked me what I thought of him, and I said, I've got him as a guy who can contribute. Why? He goes, well, I'm coaching him, and I really think this guy could eventually become a starter in the league. Wow. Like this was like well before the draft. But Wicks was a ball winner at Virginia. And he was a ball winner and a guy who could win after the catch. And what he really showed well was how good he could run stems in the as a route runner. And what I mean by that is oftentimes you'll hear wide receiver coaches call it stemming. And what they're doing is when the defender is playing outside or inside, they call it inside or outside shade. Depending on the route you're running, sometimes the way they play it, you're going to have to tell a story to get them to turn their hips in the opposite direction of your break. And sometimes they're playing in the area where you're trying to break, like you're trying to run a fade route, but they're playing outside. Well, you don't just run a fade route then. You're going to have to stem it inside and run the stem to get them to believe that you're breaking inside, and then be able to break out, but still efficiently enough that you're not going to lose your timing and position of the landmark of where they're going to throw. So he's very good at that, and he's a very good inside receiver. And while he's not the top athlete of the group, and that's probably the thing that holds him back maybe a little bit, in terms of just pure speed, he's physical, and he can separate at the catch point in tight coverage. So, he's a luxury that they have. And then you look at, and then I would say, after that, you got Christian Watson, who I think maybe everyone wants as the hopes can fulfill the promise he showed as a rookie as that number one guy and be that X who can, and I think he does a lot of things incredibly well. He's just, again, sometimes he fights the ball. His technique needs to be a little sharper.
It's his bugaboo.
Yeah. The technique just needs to be a little sharper, and that may take some time. But you could see, week one of the first year when he beat the pants off Patrick Peterson.
Oh, he was bare
press coverage, and he dropped that ball. That was everything you needed to see with him. Was like, this guy could be terrific, but he's just got to shore up some things. So I think patience, the fact that he's worked on his craft and worked at, trying to shore up some of his athletic deficiencies with injury, if that can bear fruit, there's a lot of promise there. He could be your best all-around receiver in terms of athletic ability and being a primary guy. Right. Romeo Doubs has improved. I remember
what you talked about in the beginning when you first came out.
Yeah, because Romeo Doubs looked like an NFL starter from the stance all the way until the ball arrived. And then when the ball arrived, you're like, he didn't know what to do with his hands. I joked he's like Ricky Bobby in the interview. Like, what do I do with my hands?
That's my movie. That's my movie.
Me too. That's like the position of his hands wasn't always where it needed to be at the catch point. He'd clap attack things. He didn't always time his leaps great. There are a lot of things like that. And then when you're playing with Aaron Rodgers, which is the advanced tutorial on how to make adjustments pre-snap at the line. And I always use this example with a lot of people, and you guys are intimately familiar with it because we talk about training camp. I'm always like, listen, guys, early on, you're going to see displays of athletic ability, and that gets people excited. But then wait till like week 3, week 4, because you look at Romeo Doubs and everyone's excited about him, beating people and showing his speed and his leaping ability. And a couple preseason games in, he's making some nice catches. Ooh, this is great. And then, you're not hearing about Sammy Watkins. You're not hearing about Randall Cobb or whoever it is that they had. But then suddenly week 3, week 4, they're interviewing Aaron, and Aaron's going, look, none of these young guys are going to play if they can't get on the same page with me. Because he's going to now week 3, week 4, they're going to start throwing things defensively at Aaron, and he's going to go, we got to adjust to this. And suddenly Doubs is like having to think. And if you're thinking, it took Devontae 3 years. He said, I knew I could play physically in the league. I could beat guys one-on-one, but it was like keeping up with Aaron was like.
Jordy said the same thing. Jordy said that eventually, they knew what they were thinking, but it took years to get to that point.
Yeah.
And you got Doubs as a rookie who's just trying to learn how to be an NFL wide receiver. Then he's got to get on the page with a Hall of Famer. It's like, wait up. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
So,
but now you look at him, and like last year, he had 3, maybe 4 drops total. Yeah. And he really looked good catching the ball. He still has some He still has lapses occasionally,
Yeah.
but they're nothing like what it was at Nevada.
Year one,
Yeah.
100%. I agree.
Yeah. And then Reed's my favorite, but it's only because I like how versatile he is. You can use him as a runner. He can kind of give you a little of that Deebo Samuel thing going on. And
He's built like that, too.
bites. Yeah. He's a contested catch guy. He can certainly win it. And I think he's a good route guy. I think there's a lot of Stephon Diggs in terms of his game that could be unlocked with him. And he could become your primary because he has the speed and some of the route potential there if need be. So, I mean, I don't know, man. Whoever gets hurt, I feel bad for them.
Yeah, because they're left.
Yeah, it's a narrow margin, for these guys. So they're going to spur each other on, hopefully. And you're giving Jordan Love a ton of weapons, and that's fantastic. So I think it's easily one of the top 5 young receiver units in football.
Yeah, baby. we like to brag about it. We think for like dollar wise, we're number 1 in that sense too, because of what we're spending on this wide receiver core and what they can offer us. We're stoked. We are so stoked for it this year. I also like to say that we have the best 5th and 6th wide receivers too, and Malik Heath and Bo Melton. Yeah, we have. So right now, best wide receiver group after this season, and that's kind of how we feel. I think is like right now, it's just all this budding potential, and we're hoping by the end of this year we'll be saying we're the best wide receiver core. I just want to shout out to Romeo though on that game in Dallas last year.
He lit it up.
Right, that was, I think that put him on the national stage. Right, everyone in Green Bay and Wisconsin knew about Romeo, but after that showing against Dallas at AT&T Stadium last year, he's on everyone's radar, I think, now.
Oh, for sure. So, I mean, you're looking at, when you've got that length and speed, and now you're showing that you can go up and win some of these targets on a consistent basis. That's great. Now, how he's used, you're seeing him, majority of his routes are goes, digs, and hitches, but he's used in that role. He was used more as kind of that X-like type of receiver, maybe in a lot of respects, or at least that's what you see with a lot of those routes. Well, it'll be interesting to see how much they expand the route tree with him, or what his role will be this year, or whether it'll be the same.
Yo, man. Oh, there. Yeah. So lost for 1 second.
Yeah. So I also I always got to throw it out here as always, right? I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I'm not sure what time you got for us, Matt, but maybe
we can do a little more. Sure, let's do another. We can do another half hour.
The tight ends that we thought we ain't touch it.
I want to say, Amar, if you want to jump
pull
in
everything
there,
I get out of you, man. I'm pulling up.
So if Amar, if you got a question, otherwise I'm gonna go back to the comments section here as well.
Real quick about the tight ends, where I know with Musgrave, him coming out of Oregon State, he had a lot of injury issues, right? He has the size, speed. He kind of reminds me of pre-knee injury Jimmy Graham. I don't know if that's a good comp, right? You're better than me at that. But he has that very much he's just a size, speed freak. And do you think based on the way he's built, it is conducive for him to be a not just starting caliber tight end, but actually an actual playmaker? He did pretty well last year as a rookie, right? Can he expand on that, do you think?
He probably could. The question is, will the offense allow him to? Because you're 4 deep at receiver. You've got 2 good receiving backs, really 3 good receiving backs. And then you have these tight ends that, certainly could work out in the play action game. And Grant, let's see, now you got me going. Musgrave is certainly good up the seam. He's got that burst to really win up the seam off play action. Whereas Kraft's probably better in the flats, and he can win up the seam, but he's probably a little better in the flats where you can get him off play action looks, and he catches and runs over some people. Whereas, Musgrave can do that too. But Musgrave is kind of that long-limbed dude. I see the Graham I see why you're talking about Graham as a comparison point. It's just that he has more promise as a blocker than Graham ever did.
That is so true.
You know,
You're going to block and save his life.
Yeah. But I mean, I remember going to the Senior Bowl and watching him with Damian Bird. I think it was Bird. That was the name.
Damian Bird, yeah.
The USC tight end.
He went to the Bears for a little bit too. I know.
Yeah. And they're in practice, and there's the pad that basically looks like a giant weeble wobble. When you hit it, it goes down and comes back up. Yeah. So they're trying to show Jimmy how to punch and hit it so that you flick and it goes to the ground and comes back up. And Bird hits it, flicks it down, right back up, no problem. Graham flicks it, and you could tell it was just totally unfamiliar to him. The thing barely moved, like it just kind of like wiggled. Like that was how far he had to go in terms of like. And again, it was a new drill he was learning. So I mean, it's just like
when people do it in college at all.
Yeah, he just didn't. He was that unfamiliar with it. He was a basketball player who they said, "Here, go run to here, and we'll throw it up, and you'll come down with it, rebound."
Yeah. And they worked so many times.
Yeah, it was great, but I think Musgrave's got more in the tank from that standpoint. The big question is whether he's going to be used that way, and also tight end is the second most difficult offensive position of the skill positions, maybe even just offensive position total, or even position on football field. Because name another tight end in the past 10, 15 years who did everything that Rob Gronkowski did and has stayed healthy doing it.
And stay healthy. Kelsey, maybe.
Yeah, and Kelsey's not even the blocker.
He's not a blocker. He's more of a receiving tight end, right?
Yeah. I mean, Gronkowski was a sixth lineman. He was one-on-one with strong side linebackers and defensive ends. He could take those guys one-on-one. So George Kittle,
I was just going to say Kittle. Yeah, that's the closest I can think of right now.
But even
he
Kittle
can't stay healthy, though.
Yeah.
He's banged up all damn time.
Because it's an impossible position now.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally like they're literally saying you've got to be the sixth offensive line. If you're going to be an all-around tight end, you got to be the sixth offensive lineman. And then you have to be a primary route runner, like a wide receiver. Then you got to be able to run after the catch. And not just to mention the mental aspects of protections and being on the same page with your quarterback and your offensive lineman and all the variety of blocks that you can be. If you're an H-back, are you running across a formation and trying to be a lead blocker, or are you taking a guy one-on-one, like with leverage and strength? So, it takes so many different types of things that wears you out. Luke Musgrave has the body for that potentially, but it's hard to say, will you stay healthy? Generally, they say choose. Generally, the coaches go, let's choose, and we'll pick our spots with the versatility factor with some of these guys. So I doubt he's going to be put in that position. Yeah. And with Kraft being as good as he was, I think they don't have to. Kraft's going to be more Mr. Short area blocking, Brock Wright type-esque, for the
dig him out kind of thing.
Yeah. And then Musgrave gets a chance to be Laporta, but probably without as the widest range of responsibilities as a route runner.
Right on. I got high hopes for this wide receiver tight end group, man, and it's going to be exciting to see how that unfolds. One of our other listeners, Chris Rhyme, he wants to make sure that we plug your rookie scouting portfolio again. I think we talked about it at the beginning.
Chris is almost a bigger fan as I am of you, man.
Yeah, I know Chris. I recognize Chris. Chris is a longtime customer as well. I appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah, and we have some fantasy football listeners here tonight, and so maybe you could plug a few rookies here you think that could have an impact on fantasy teams year one.
Yeah, I think the most obvious is Malik Neighbors of LSU. I know that people go, but Daniel Jones isn't very good. But Jalen Waddle didn't have great quarterback play, and he was pretty good as a rookie.
That's true.
And there's a number of players like that you look at and say you can say that about. So the thing about Neighbors is that he's a fantastic route runner from the beginning of the route to the end. He's someone that's tough at the catch point. He can get ping-ponged around and still come down with the ball. He makes people miss in the open field, so he's a dynamic runner after the catch. And he just toys with people. He already has a really strong repertoire of releases and hand counters and ways to create separation with the stem that aren't playground oriented, but refined pro level wide receiver efficiency. So he's my favorite rookie in this class. I think that I think he has a chance to be 1,000-yard receiver year one, because you look at the Giants roster and it's like they had a bunch of complimentary receivers. Yeah. And some of them had to try and play in roles that were really above their pay grade. And I think he kind of helps set that room to leverage their strengths a little bit better. And if Daniel Jones doesn't get it done, maybe Drew Lock will, so
he looked okay in Seattle when he came in for Geno. He didn't look bad.
And he looked like a kid who realized that maybe I needed to get it. I think he learned that he needed to get it together, and it was just a little too late for Denver. Other guys that probably fit that mold, certainly Marvin Harrison's going to get a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
People love him, and I think he's a terrific player. He has some spectacular highs tracking the ball with his back to the quarterback. And so as long as Kyler Murray gets rid of the ball quickly, and allows Marvin Harrison to, win the route, and he trusts Marvin Harrison to win those plays in tight coverage, it could be a big year for Harrison, and he could rival Malik Neighbors. But we know Kyler Murray tends to like to buy time, and maybe not. He doesn't step up in the pocket. He
runs around the pocket. Yeah.
Yeah. And he has those 8-second plays that don't bear fruit a lot. No. But he still throws for a lot of yards, but it's not like, he's going to force people to reroute and do all that. And maybe becomes a little more difficult. And Harrison does have some catch point, little minor things that might get exacerbated in the NFL. With how he attacks the ball on certain types of routes. But I think he should be good. Rome Odunze, I mean, the big question.
I'm so mad Chicago got him, man.
Yeah. I mean,
he's such a good player.
He is a good player. And he might be the best combination of athletic ability and route running of the three receivers that we've now mentioned. It's just a matter of whether or not, with Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams can be a top 10 producer this year. I wouldn't. You don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to. You don't have to bet on it as a fantasy GM. Yeah. It's probably too rich to do that. There's so many other good players you could get, but I won't be shocked if he does it, because I think he's that good, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Odunze gives you about 600 to 800 yards and 4 to 6 touchdowns year one, and really comes on towards the end. Some guys that. Brock Bowers, I mean, listen, hasn't dropped the ball yet in practice, apparently.
Seriously?
Yeah, that's what Kirk Morrison said. That Bob Harris told me, the former linebacker, saying coverage. He hasn't dropped the ball at all. Winning balls in tight coverage, getting open, all business. Devonta Adams calls him businessman, because he just comes in and does his job and leaves. And it's so
crazy. They got him. They had Michael Mayer, right? But I was like, I guess when talent's there, best player available, you take him, right? I get it.
And 2 tight end sets allow you, as you guys know, it forces defenses to really account for more than they would like to, because that's the most difficult alignment, is 12 personnel or condensed sets. When you have condensed sets like that, you look at Detroit and how well they do with condensed sets. It allows them to work people open in matchups where now suddenly your wide receiver is facing a defensive end or a defensive tackle, and you can't help it, because that's how they were able to dictate it. And so you create spacing and different things that are really really advantageous. And I think that with Brock Bowers, they can probably do that with him and Michael Mayer. Guys, maybe later on in the year that I think are interesting. If Justin Herbert gets back and doesn't have any lingering effects from the plantar fascia.
Stuff, right?
Yeah. Lad McConkey is perfect in that offense. Yeah. He's perfect.
No, he's not. I should say that.
Yeah. Well, he's going to have he does have the Cooper Kupp role.
He has a role. That's it, though. Physically, he's way more athletic than Cooper Kupp ever was.
Well, I will say this: Cooper Kupp wasn't as fast as Ladd McConkey, but Cooper Kupp was unbelievably quick in short area and acceleration. I mean, like Allen Robinson level.
His
when you
agility
look
was
at
disgusting.
off the charts. You know, so and he was more physical than Ladd McConkey is.
He's bigger than Ladd, isn't he?
Yeah, he's physical. He could definitely boss people around. But I think with Ladd, he's so good at reading leverage. He's so good at running routes and double moves, and he's very good in the screen game and setting up blocks that he fits the Greg Roman role for their primary receiver, which is their wide receiver one isn't the wide receiver one on the outside playing the Christian Watson role. Their wide receiver one was the Michael Crabtree or the Sammy Watkins or the Robert Woods or the guy that played inside, and then they worked him inside out, or occasionally they moved him around, but he was mainly the big play slot receiver. And I think that's what Ladd McConkey gets to be with Justin Herbert. Running back wise, I think I think Jonathan Brooks is an excellent talent. And I actually liked him a little more. He graded out a little bit higher than Jahmyr Gibbs, which just basically means that I think they're similar in terms of not similar talents. They're different style of players, but they have a similar talent level. And Brooks is a very refined runner, smart, who catches the ball well, great blocker, great pass protector at this stage already, powerful runner, really understands how to manage contact and deliver it. And if he's like truly healthy and not just healthy enough to be on the field, like the Tony Pollard healthy last year, which is common, then he can be, I think he could be very impactful at the end of the season. And then I'll say, just as kind of my Jermaine Burton is another good one, wide receiver.
That's my dog.
Yeah.
he's as crazy as hell, but he's an amazing talent.
Yeah, terrific receiver. And Dylan Lobby is the late round guy that I would tell people to keep an eye on, the Las Vegas Raiders running back. My co-host Brandon Angelo, he and I both were really high on him. Brandon's a trainer in the Chicago area. He's also a Bears fan. And former running back and track athlete at Purdue. He jokes that his claim to fame is him getting beaten in all freshman meet beaten by Tyreek Hill, and everyone at the meet who was competing against him all looked at Hill and laughed and thought, who's this football player that thinks he's going to come in here and whip us, this short little guy, And he was 101, and they realized that about midway through the race, they were just like, whoa, but he talks about, we both like Lobby, and he knew some people that I think
he's getting reps too. He's playing reps with Zamir White, I think.
He is, and he's an excellent pass receiver, and he's about 210. So it's not like he's like a small scat back. He's more on the borderline of a guy who could eventually become a lead back. And look, Antonio Pierce said, I love his grit. I love how he catches out of the backfield. Cadillac Williams is his running backs coach.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yes. So Cadillac was a hell of a football player before
he was
the injuries.
awesome coming out.
He got run into the ground, but he was he was fantastic at Auburn. And he's, I would bet he's
Ronnie Brown. This is Ronnie Brown.
Yeah, Ronnie Brown and Cadillac.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Tampa and Miami. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was very high on what he saw with Lobby as well. And this is one of those things that you could just kind of see coming. So those are guys that probably this year are the most interesting. And then if the injuries crop up, I'm sure there are other guys that we could really talk about. But like say Miami would be a good spot. I would say that Malik Washington, the wide receiver out of Virginia.
Oh yeah, Mr. Virginia himself.
Yeah, great after the catch, great at winning the ball in the air.
Nice
good route runner. He kind of reminds me of like a middle class Santana Moss, And
wow, yeah, size and everything. That's a good comp.
Yeah. So he may not be
that's
like
fast. He's not as fast.
He's not as fast,
Yeah.
but he could do some damage if he gets onto the field and gets extended playing time due to an injury.
Damn, right on. Hey, man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sitting down and talking with us. So you said something a little bit ago about later in the season, which made me think I'd like to have you back later in the season, and we can talk about some of these rookies again. We can get back into this wide receiver crew. That'd be awesome, man. But that's all I got for you. Amar, you got anything? Any last words?
No, because if I keep going, I'm gonna be here with him for like 2 hours. We're gonna keep talking, and I know we all got other things to do.
No, this was a lot of fun, guys.
Matt,
I really appreciate it. I'd be more than happy to come back.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you so much for honoring us, man. This was absolutely amazing. It's funny that I've been listening to you for years, and now we finally got you on our show. I just feel really blessed right now, so I'm really happy.
Hey, man. Well, I appreciate it. And with Chris asking, I'll mention it because it's, I'll do this, the rookie scouting portfolio. It's 20th year. It's scouting reports of 150 players at the skill positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It's one of the 2 most purchased draft guides, independent draft guides out there by NFL people, according to folks like Old Miss recruiter Alex Brown, who also was the head of recruiting at SMU and worked at Rice in Houston before that. So he meets with these guys weekly and knows what they're bringing, what they look at and what they see. And he lets me know that on a regular basis. I also contribute scouting reports to Will Hewlett, who's the quarterback coach for Caleb Williams and for Anthony Richardson and for Brock Purdy. So, I'm not going to get, scouting's hard. You're not going to get everything right, but I show my work. You're going to look at it and probably be blown away about how much is in there, but I do make it easy to navigate so that you can get just the answers you want. But it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. You want to dig deep, I'll give you depth that you probably don't see most anywhere else. And you'll learn more about the game if you want to. And it's organized in that way where you really can see my process and be taken through it, hopefully in an entertaining way. And if you're just like, I just want to know whether this guy is good for me to pick in my draft, you get that. You get a post-draft version that's more like a smaller version. It gives you cheat sheets and updates. And that's for $21.95. And I donate to a cause called Darkness to Light. Mm-hmm. We've donated close to $70,000 to them since 2012. They're an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children through educational programs, as well as how to teach adults how to address the issue when it is reported to them so that they don't compound the problem by by mishandling it. Think Penn State and Michigan State. They've worked with both those groups post scandals to try to help them to figure out what they should have done and how to handle it moving forward. So we're really proud of being able to donate to them. And there's also a dynasty rankings and projection service I do. That's a separate price. You can get it all at mattwaldman.com and read about everything there if you want. And I have an email. You can check that out at mattwaldmanrsp@gmail. And I'll answer your questions usually within 24 hours if I can get to it. Usually I do.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's an awesome resource. It is an amazing resource,
and a great
times already.
Yeah, I'll say a great cause there. A great cause there too. Yes. As a former school teacher, man, that seeing the impact of that on students that are experiencing those things, man, that's awesome.
As a school teacher, that it's probably one of the most serious things that nobody ever wants to talk about in society. But it may be one of the things that makes the most impact on childhood in terms of alcoholism, drug abuse, criminal behavior, all sorts of problems that happen. Oftentimes, one of the leading factors is this issue, and it's usually not the dude in the white van offering candy. That's the issue. It's a parent or a sibling or a family member or a neighbor. Yeah. So.
Wow. Well, hey, great stuff there, Matt. We'll cut you loose, man. We'll see you later this season. Thanks again, and I think Amar will get a hold of you.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
I'll definitely reach out. Yeah, Matt,
appreciate it, fellas. Thank you.
Peace.
See you.
Man, great
That was
guest.
awesome.
Again, a fountain of knowledge, and I like how he says how he breaks it down, and then the money he's giving. You know, I know I think it was Chris that actually commented the name of that organization. Was it Turning Light into Dark?
Yeah, I'm gonna go find it for it. Yeah, I got it right here.
Yeah. Darkness to Light. There it is. So great cause there. Thanks for bringing that up, Chris. I'm glad we gave Matt a chance to plug that. Also, just want to say thanks for everyone stopping by, and I look forward to having Matt again later this season. Talk about those rookies and talk about this receiving core. But Amar, you got anything? Any last words before we jump off here?
Oh man, I'll just say we had family night. That was awesome, and I'm looking forward to practice this week. Tucker Kraft just got activated off of PUP, and Zach Thomas practicing, not 100% with team yet, but he's getting there. So man, and also the unofficial depth chart just came out, so everybody check it out. We're looking to have Tom Grassi on tomorrow night, and we're gonna be interviewing him and just talking to him about just everything about Packers and just his stardom, how he started out and where he is now and everything. So we're looking forward to that show. Yeah, we're just planning on just trying to do as much as we can to get you guys as much content as we can. And just stick around with us, and we'll keep pushing through.
Yeah, baby. And it's game week.
It's game week, baby. Yep.
And as always, though, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.